Hey there, I'm Pops, and welcome to another Throwback Thursday. This week, Passion of the Christ, right? Almost 20 years, 2004. Jim Caviezel. This film shook the world, broke records, was a buzz for weeks, months. I don't even remember. It was chaos. And full confession, this is probably one of the films I would put on the list where my review and impression initially versus now is radically different. Now, with that said, I'm going to explain in the video why, and I'm going to do something I don't normally do for Throwback Thursdays. I'm going to pull up the trailer, show you some footage, kind of highlight some elements that I may like or dislike, that kind of thing. I think it's safe to show the footage from the trailer. I don't want to get into all the copyright nonsense for a Throwback Thursday because I don't want to do an extensive breakdown or anything like that. This is a film that not everybody enjoys. It is not even well received in all areas of the um, Protestant churches. It was received well, I think, with the Catholic Church in some ways, and in other ways, some people just want anything to do with it because it basically it's graphic, right? It has to deal with the Passion Week, and particularly on Thursday into Friday, right? It starts right at the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is in agony as he's praying. He's basically praying because he knows what's about to happen, and he's praying. This is all very scriptural. It's very biblically accurate about if this is your will, I'll do it, but take this away from me. Like, if there's a way that I don't have to do this, I don't really want to do this. That's at least what's implied. Now, his words are what they are. I thought this was very well portrayed. They do have a nice cutaway to Judas and the 10 silver pieces. He's basically been paid off to say this is where Jesus is and where he's going to be. And of course, they rally the troops to go for an arrest scene. And you do have the scene with Malchus where they cut the ear off and Jesus puts it back. You have a lot of great lead up, I think, with the interrogation part of it and how it was sort of like the middle of the night stuff that wasn't really the norm in their culture and in their environment. There's a little bit of pushback, and they basically push that guy right out of the room. And I think that was actually, I think, all done pretty well. So I agree, man. So they got to deal with this whole you know black mode versus dark mode for StreamYard. This is like really frustrating because it's really the glare from the computer, not from my light. I thought it was my light. But then I can't see. So I guess we'll just kind of go with this because it's very distracting to look at my eyes with these big white circles. Um, so the film does progress through the questioning, the judgment by the Jews, going to the Roman leaders, Pilate pushing that back onto Herod, who's more like a local leader. Herod doesn't do anything about it. Herod just sends him right back to Pilate. And basically, they offer up like a torture as an option, and then it's a replacement, same to the cross and the ultimate death and sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So, why has my opinion changed? My opinion has changed dramatically because I would have told you I was a Christian when I saw this in 2004. But I remember seeing it and I remember writing how much there's just no substance to this film. There's no plot really. It's just a bunch of violence. And I didn't understand really enough of the context. I didn't really understand. I probably didn't even know what the term passion was, like this term that's used for this time frame. I was familiar with Bible stories. I was familiar with certain elements of it, but I wasn't as emotionally connected as I am now. Whereas now, when I watch a film like that, it moves me to my core because it depicts at least some version of what actually happened, which if we look at other elements of history and culture and what's been documented, it actually is significantly worse. He wouldn't have had clothes on. He would have been completely naked. He would have beaten even worse than he actually was. Like, he would have been almost unrecognizable. There are elements of that's what they would do to people. Just or not just, it doesn't matter. That's what actually would have happened. But this film at least broaches um, a lot of things that I don't think Christians can get their head around. For instance, like Peter denying Christ, I think is handled very, very well with the mob scenes. Like, oh, sure, it's easy to say you wouldn't deny or you wouldn't do this, and you saw miracles, so therefore, seeing is believing. Right. Until the mob is at your front door or literally at your throat. And then suddenly you recoil and you shrivel up and you're just, you're a husk of who you claim to be. and the devastating effects of that. I also think the self deletion, right? What Judas decides to do, I thought was pretty good because it is implied maybe he didn't know that they were going to do this. Maybe it was more like an arrest. He didn't know he was selling him over, turning him over to this level of torture and execution. I thought that depiction I thought was very moving. I think that the way they handle Mary, almost like a spiritual connection to him and things like that, is more of like the Catholicism bleeding through, more like the elevation of Mary. I think the flashbacks and the cutaways to the stoning of Mary Magdalene, um, him working as a carpenter, I thought was fine. I think that was, kind of some nice creative liberties there. Other of those moments, these moments, the Last Supper, of course, all these kinds of things. I think that the film really does represent a way to immerse yourself emotionally in this week leading up to Easter, all of the different elements in the emotional roller coaster that you should have as a believer. I can see as a film how there's not a lot to that because it's a film that I usually try to put caveats in that it is uh, a film that's meant to capture a moment or an event. There's not a lot of other context and stories and things like that. The journey, whether it be heroism and sacrifice, those kinds of things are portrayed as closely to uh, the actual event as you can or you want. And I think that's what this film does. It does this type of depiction, and I know it's very divisive. I know that there are Jews that I think react very negatively to all of this. They extrapolate the worst possible opinions onto Protestants. And I think Protestants who read into this may be trying to conflate all of the Jewish community onto these corrupt leaders. All of that is factored into this. I'm not naive to that. But what I am saying is that as a person who literally once my life changed, wow, it's been like almost 15 years. Uh, I watched this film like every single year, and I actually would do screenings at the church. I got permission to do screenings at the church. We told people, of course, it's rated R, it's very graphic. I remember having my daughter, my youngest daughter, watch it the first time. She started crying. And it is just difficult to watch. And if you believe, then you understand that things are happening on your behalf. That is part of your belief. So it kind of even changes and deepens the meaning for you. If you don't believe and you see this, I hope you can still enjoy some of the historical elements to know this is what they would do to other humans. Like, forget about God for a second. Just that Jesus, the good person, he just tried to be a good person. Just forget about all the spirituality. He was just a good man who walked around, said some things. You don't believe he was God, whatever. It's a good historical representation of kind of how the political conflict and religious conflict played out, how they would treat people, and what they would actually do. There's a lot of people I know who didn't know most people that were crucified didn't carry the whole cross. That's the depiction that they carry their whole cross, whereas most of the time they carry the crossbeam. Like it's really not as humanly possible as it's sort of like easily to conceive to carry this thing as far as he would have had to carry it. Likewise, the actual process of the crucifixion with the way the hands are tied, shoulder could be dislocated, where they put the nails, all these kinds of things. Some of these things were done in just random ways. Like one person may not have done it the same as the other. So when you start to research that, you start to get into different contradictions. I try not to spin my wheels too much. I kind of got it. Whether they did it through his wrist, through his palm, his feet are on top of each other, whether they're separate, it's in the ankles. Does it really make that much of a difference to me? No, it doesn't. It doesn't make that much of a difference to me. Maybe it makes a difference to other people, but it doesn't make a difference to me. So let me pull up the film itself. This is the trailer. And try. Oh, I don't have the sound off, so let me get the sound off of there. So I will say one of the big negatives for me would have been the marketing. So when this film came out, the way this trailer is presenting things, this is footage that is implying more of a life of Jesus than just the final week. So these are shots that were done when he's drawing the circle and the names in the sand, the information in the sand at the stoning of Mary Magdalene, which is very easy to identify. And then you sort of have Garden of Gethsemane scenes, you start to see some of that. And then, you don't get, and then, of course, this is the, the capture and arrest of Jesus, right? And then you get into Mary, his mom, and then you have some shots where you see incredible, I think, interesting and detailed part. Now, here you do see he's beaten. You do see what he looks like, but you don't necessarily get the scope of this. I do say I love these scenes. I think it was all done pretty well, but it's not as though the film, because you can see the film is showing you a little bit about him, like him walking with the cross. But even then, you can't, this is none of this sort of the brutality of the torture scene was conveyed in the marketing. Like, you don't get this. You just kind of get a life of Jesus kind of thing. Here's the hammer, which I love, by the way, that Mel Gibson did that himself, which I think is really powerful. Last Supper, again at Calvary. That's the dropping of the hammer. This Mary. So you have a lot more of the marketing at the time felt a lot more like life of Jesus than just the crucifixion of Jesus, right? There's a lot of footage that implies more than just, because so much of the film is after he is beaten and bloodied and, devastated and almost unrecognizable. And that, again, the torture scene isn't really hinted to enough in the marketing. Like, for me, part of the surprise or my negative reaction may have been, I can't tell you 100%. It's been over 10 years, almost 20, was that it was just not what I expected. Right. And so much of it was that, so much. And because I think that strikes you to your core, so much of that has an impact on you. It would kind of like me saying, I saw the trailer for Saving Private Ryan. There was no footage of the Normandy Beach sequence. So when I went and saw the movie, it was not what I expected. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here. Whereas now it's almost like I care a lot less about some of the, like the scene where the Jews are interrogating him and then he has to go to Herod's house and all. I care so much less about a lot of that stuff than I do about the stuff that's very impactful, that actually is portrayed in this film. So for Easter, I thought this was an interesting choice. It was an interesting piece of conversation. Maybe it's a film that you have or never you have seen, but haven't seen in a while. Maybe it's something you have never seen. I would love your thoughts. I would love any feedback that you have on this. Of course, I love all the recommendations. I keep them coming. I can tell you that it was another emotional time rewatching this and experiencing it yet again. And I'm glad I did. And I get to thank you guys for a lot of that, because you're the main reason that happens. So with all of that, I just want to say thanks again for being here. And if you enjoy this stuff, just hit like and feel free to engage any way you feel free. Thank you so much again. I am Pops.